Every case has evidence, every clue has a story, and every mystery has a solution hidden somewhere in the facts. The question is, can you find it before we reveal the answer? This is the case file. Kuala Lumpur International Airport, Malaysia, Saturday, March 8, 2014. At 12:41 in the morning, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 pushed back from gate C1 and began taxiing toward the runway. It was a routine overnight service, a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the most reliable commercial aircraft ever built, operating a flight it had made hundreds of times before. Destination: Beijing Capital International Airport. Flight time: approximately 5 hours and 30 minutes. On board, 227 passengers and 12 crew. 239 people in total. The weather was clear. The aircraft was in good mechanical condition. The crew were experienced. There were no reported issues of any kind. At 12:42, MH370 received takeoff clearance from Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control. At 12:42 and 05 seconds, it began its takeoff roll. At 12:41 and 43 seconds, the Boeing 777 lifted off the runway and climbed into the clear Malaysian night. Everything was normal. For the next 38 minutes, MH370 flew northeast on its planned route, climbing through its assigned altitudes and exchanging routine radio calls with Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control. At 1:01 in the morning, the aircraft checked in at its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. At 1:07, it transmitted a final routine data report via its ACARS system, the automatic communication system that sends technical data from the aircraft to the airline on the ground. The report showed nothing unusual. At 1:19 in the morning, as MH370 approached the boundary between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control made a final radio call to the aircraft. The response came immediately in a calm and professional voice. "Good night. Malaysia, 370. That was the last voice transmission ever received from MH370. 90 seconds later, at 1:21 in the morning, the aircraft's transponder, the device that allows radar systems to identify and track an aircraft, stopped transmitting. MH370 disappeared from secondary radar screens across the region. When Vietnamese air traffic control tried to make contact as the aircraft entered their airspace, there was no response. When the airline tried to reach the crew, there was no response. When military radar operators reviewed their screens, they found something that would change the entire direction of the investigation. MH370 had not disappeared. It had turned. Malaysian military primary radar, which tracks physical objects rather than transponder signals, had continued tracking an unidentified aircraft after MH370's transponder went dark. That aircraft had made a sharp turn to the left, crossing back over the Malay Peninsula, flying northwest over the Strait of Malacca, and then continuing in a direction that took it away from its planned route entirely, and away from any commercial air corridor. The turn was not a malfunction. It was not an emergency deviation. The waypoints entered into the flight management system, the aircraft's autopilot navigation computer, were specific, deliberate, and required someone with knowledge of aviation navigation systems to program. Someone on that aircraft had intentionally changed course. For the next 6 hours and 12 minutes, MH370 flew on, untracked by civilian radar, silent on all radio frequencies, with its transponder and ACARS system both switched off. The only record of its continued flight came from an unlikely source. A British satellite company called Inmarsat had a satellite positioned over the Indian Ocean. That satellite was not tracking MH370. It was not receiving any data transmissions from MH370. But it was receiving something else, an automated electronic handshake, a technical signal called a ping, that the aircraft's satellite communication system was sending once per hour simply to maintain contact with the network. The pings carried no information. They were the electronic equivalent of the aircraft saying, quietly, "I am still here." 7 pings were recorded between 2:25 in the morning and 8:19 Malaysian time, a period of approximately 6 hours. Inmarsat's analysts used the timing and signal characteristics of these pings to calculate the distance from the satellite at each transmission point. The analysis produced two possible arcs, a northern arc stretching across Central Asia and a southern arc stretching deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean. Within days, investigators ruled out the northern arc. Military radar from multiple countries along that route had recorded nothing. The southern arc, thousands of kilometers of open ocean, among the most remote and inhospitable waters on Earth, became the primary focus of what would become the most expensive aviation search in history. That is the evidence. A Boeing 777 carrying 239 people makes a deliberate turn-off course 90 minutes into its flight. Transponder switched off, ACARS switched off. Silence on all frequencies. 6 hours of continued flight tracked only by automated satellite pings. A search zone in the southern Indian Ocean the size of Western Europe. And after 10 years of searching, no complete wreckage, no flight recorders, and no definitive explanation. So here is the challenge. Using only the evidence presented, can you determine what happened to MH370? Was this a mechanical failure, a deliberate act by someone on board, an external intervention? And what is the single most significant piece of evidence in all of this? The one detail that, if you reason through it carefully, tells you the most about what actually happened on that aircraft after 1:19 in the morning. Pause the video now and write down your theory. Then drop it in the comments below. We want to know what you think before the reveal. When you come back, we will show you everything investigators discovered in the decade that followed, including the debris, the pilot evidence, and the one piece of data that investigators say points most strongly toward a single explanation. We will see you on the other side. The search for MH370 ran across multiple phases and cost in excess of $160 million. Australia led the underwater search through its Australian Transport Safety Bureau, deploying specialist vessels equipped with deep-sea sonar across more than 120,000 square kilometers of southern Indian Ocean sea floor. They found nothing. In July 2015, 16 months after the disappearance, a fragment of aircraft wing structure washed ashore on Reunion Island in the western Indian Ocean. It was identified as a flaperon from a Boeing 777. Serial number analysis confirmed it came from 9M-MRO, the specific aircraft registration of MH370. It was the first confirmed physical evidence of the aircraft ever recovered. Over the following years, additional debris pieces were found on the coastlines of Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa, and Mauritius. The drift patterns of these pieces, when modeled backwards using ocean current data, were consistent with a crash site in the southern Indian Ocean, in the area around 35 degrees south latitude. But the debris provided no information about what had happened on board. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, the black boxes, have never been found. Investigators built a detailed picture of the aircraft's final flight path using the Inmarsat satellite data, fuel burn calculations, and the drift modeling of recovered debris. The most likely crash site, according to the most recent analysis, lies in a specific area of the southern Indian Ocean, approximately 1,800 kilometers west of Perth, Australia, in water between 3,000 and 4,000 meters deep. In 2024, a new search by a private company using updated modeling and ocean floor mapping technology was approved by the Malaysian government. At time of production, that search is ongoing. No wreckage has been found. The investigation examined every possible explanation for the deliberate course change. 2 passengers were traveling on stolen passports. This was investigated extensively. Both were asylum seekers with no connection to terrorism. The cargo manifest included lithium batteries and mangosteens. The batteries were investigated as a potential fire risk. investigators concluded it was unlikely. The focus of the investigation turned, and has remained, on the flight deck. The captain was Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, with 18,000 hours of flight experience, one of Malaysia Airlines' most experienced and respected pilots. The first officer was Fariq Abdul Hamid, 27 years old, on his first flight as a fully qualified commercial pilot. A flight simulator recovered from Captain Zahari's home contained data showing he had previously plotted routes into the southern Indian Ocean, including one route that investigators noted bore a resemblance to MH370's final calculated flight path. The simulator data had been partially deleted. Recovery of the deleted data produced the southern Indian Ocean route. Investigators also found evidence suggesting that approximately 40 minutes before the flight, while MH370 was still on the ground, someone accessed the in-flight entertainment system's server, a system that, in the Boeing 777, is connected to the same network as the aircraft's satellite communications. What this access was, and whether it was routine or significant, was never conclusively determined. The official Malaysian investigation, released in 2018, concluded that the aircraft's deviation was the result of deliberate action by someone on board, but did not name a responsible individual, citing insufficient evidence. Investigators pursued multiple theories seriously. Theory 1. Captain Zahari conducted a deliberate act, for reasons that remain unknown, descending to incapacitate the passengers and crew at altitude, then flying south until fuel exhaustion. The simulator data, the deliberate systems deactivation, and the flight path all support this theory. It remains the most widely held conclusion among independent aviation investigators. Theory 2. A fire or catastrophic pressurization failure incapacitated the crew, with the aircraft then flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. Advocates of this theory point to the calm final radio transmission and argue that a deliberate act would be inconsistent with Captain Zahari's character and life. Critics note that a pressurization event would not explain the deliberate waypoint changes made before any emergency would have developed. Theory 3. An external actor, through remote access to the aircraft's systems, took control of MH370. This theory has been proposed by a small number of researchers pointing to the network access event identified in the investigation. No credible evidence has confirmed it, and aviation security experts consider it extremely unlikely given the system architecture of the Boeing 777. Here is what we know with reasonable confidence. MH370 made a deliberate turn. Its transponder and communication systems were switched off by a human action. It flew for approximately 6 hours after disappearing from civilian radar. It came down somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean, and at least 19 pieces of its structure have washed ashore across the western Indian Ocean coastline. Here is what we still do not know: exactly where it is, exactly what happened on the flight deck after 1:19 in the morning, and why. And here is the detail that matters most, the one that was always present in the evidence. The final words. Good night, Malaysia 370. Those words were spoken after the transponder had already been programmed to switch off, but before it actually did. In other words, whoever spoke those words knew what was about to happen. The calm, routine, professional sign-off was not the voice of a crew managing an emergency. It was not the voice of someone alarmed or distressed. It was the voice of someone saying goodbye to air traffic control in a way that would not raise any alarm. A composed, deliberate, final transmission designed to buy time. It is the detail that, if you sit with it, tells you the most about those final moments on the flight deck of MH370. 239 people, 10 years, $160 million, 19 pieces of debris, and a voice, calm in the Malaysian night, saying goodnight. No wreckage, no answers, no end. That is, the case file. A new case every week. Real evidence, real clues. One chance to solve it before the reveal. Subscribe, and we will see you next case.